City Housing Authority, better known as Nycha, is the largest housing authority in the nation, with over 400,000 New Yorkers who reside within it. Over the years, these developments, known as projects, have crumbled, with thousands of New Yorkers continually having to beg and plead to get repairs that are needed within the apartment. They've rallied, they've protested, they've gone to media, yet Band-Aid remedies are all that's being given for a fix here and there, while the bulk of these developments remain in severe disrepair. Yet somehow, the blame for the disrepair of Nycha has been placed upon those who live within it, instead of the withdrawing of funding from this government, who has a duty and obligation to maintain these apartments in conditions that are livable, safe, and secure. And because of this systematic withdrawing of funding, there is no oversight nor protection for any of these residents who remain in these apartments. Buildings are vandalized, doors and mailboxes are broken, and it's become a haven for anybody who decides to camp out on the roof and live there, or transact business in the form of drugs, or use it as a toilet, leaving urine and feces in the stairwells. As a result of the abandonment of these developments by the federal government, who has not only withdrawn the funding needed, but continues to chip away at all that's currently being provided, Nycha is in the process of selling off these buildings underneath Red Pack, a program that allows private developers to take over these properties and make the repairs needed. And the same funding which was once given to Nycha is instead being given to these private developers in the form of subsidies which guarantee the transaction will be profitable for these developers, whether or not they complete or make the needed repairs. Yet tenants are given no say either before, during, or after these conversions underneath Red Pack. They tell them they're going to renovate their buildings one day, then come back the next and say, no, actually, we're going to demolish your building, displacing thousands of people. So this is the current state of Nycha. Did I mention the shootings, the rapes, the murders? Because that cannot go without being addressed. Because more than the need for repairs highlighted in the news are the habitual shootings and murders. You would think they camp out on some of these projects waiting for a shooting to occur because of how quick they are to show it and post it on the news. Plenty of cops in these communities, yet continuous random shootings. And I'm not talking about murders, but shootings. People have been shot and killed in these developments, but there's a whole lot of shootings seemingly for no apparent reason. And people don't even call the police. They are so accustomed to hearing shootings. And in addition, they don't like police and feel they're doing nothing but harassing people and for no reason. Depending on what side of the city you live on, you may have seen it for yourself, what police are doing in these communities. And it has nothing to do with preventing or solving any crime. I've lived in many different parts of this city, and I've seen them in action. And I can tell you of a certainty, the occupancy of police in these communities is not for the prevention of crime. These are communities of Black and Hispanic people, always deemed to be a threat for no apparent reason but the color of their skin. This ain't up for debate, it ain't up for dispute, it's documented, established, and proven. Yet the public has been led to believe crime prevention is the basis and intent for their presence. If you do not listen to the victims wrongfully arrested, brutalized, and harassed, then deemed to be a gang member simply for being entered into a police database as a gang member, never even knowing that they've been entered into it as such, maybe you'll listen to those who try to defend them, who gave testimony concerning it at the New York City Council hearings. They were pleading with them to intervene because Nycha is working in concert with NYPD to allow the surveillance of Nycha residents without even telling them they're under constant surveillance or the degree to which they are being surveilled, or how their children can easily be inducted into an NYPD database for gang members, which puts a label and a tag on them which can literally end their life. Because if shot and killed by police, police will report and tell the public that they were a known gang member. And all they did was give ID to police when requested.
Good afternoon. My name is Nycha Gross, and I am the supervising attorney of the youth law team at Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem. There I represent young people facing charges in family and in criminal court. I represent some of the Nycha residents that the other members of this panel have already spoken about, but I'm going to focus my testimony specifically on children, teens, and young adults, since those are the Nycha residents I mostly represent. We have seen the results of Nycha surveillance and how it's abused by the police. We've seen the police following children around, documenting their interactions with their neighbors and with their family, and labeling those interactions as gang affiliation. We've seen this surveillance and its results used against our clients in court, used in asking judges to set higher bail, used in trying to keep cases in adult court for young people. The NYPD has subjected the surveilled youth to constant harassment when they're walking around the neighborhood. The situations that were discussed by the other panelists are things that I hear from my clients on a daily basis. They have no privacy and no safety within their own homes and within their own community. On the first panel, we had NYPD representatives speaking about how this surveillance is used to reconstruct events and used to solve crime, but that's not how we've seen it used. We've seen it used to follow people around, using the direct access that they have and using live camera footage, not footage after the fact. In court filings, police have admitted to surveilling youth via Nycha video, watching who they spend time with, who their friends are, and even documenting how they spend time with their own family members. Documenting it so that they can use it against them one day if they ever come to court. One example that I've seen of how it's used against the youth, using the surveillance to label one of my clients as a gang member because of who he spent his time with, including his own family members. He was observed by NYPD, spying on him using live surveillance in Nycha housing, and NYPD admitted to watching him over 50 times with these same individuals. This is a violation of his First Amendment right of association simply based on where he lives, a choice that a teenager doesn't get to make. And an important part of being a child, of being a teenager, is spending time with peers. And our clients shouldn't have to worry about the police surveilling them, surveilling children, and using it to build a dossier just because they live in Nycha housing. At Neighborhood Defender Service of Harlem, we understand how important community is, and we should be encouraging youth to develop positive relationships and healthy community, not criminalizing childhood friendships and childhood family relationships. We thank the City Council for this oversight and urge the Council to put a stop to this extreme policing, because Nycha residents, especially the children who live in Nycha housing, shouldn't have fewer rights just because of where they live.
Good afternoon, chairs and committee members. My name is Talia Kamran, and I'm an attorney in Brooklyn Defender Services Seizure and Surveillance Defense Project. Brooklyn Defenders represents low-income New Yorkers in criminal court in Brooklyn and Queens, and also represents people in Brooklyn in family court and immigration proceedings, as well as offering a range of civil legal services. Most of the people that we represent are people of color who live in neighborhoods subject to some of the heaviest policing and surveillance in the city. Our clients and their communities are tracked by street cameras, shot spotter, license plate readers, predictive policing systems, and NYPD databases. And now, with this new plan to blanket Nycha housing with police-controlled cameras tied to the Big Apple Connect Wi-Fi program, the city is expanding that constant surveillance into people's homes. The Post Act was passed to ensure that New Yorkers know how they're being watched. It requires the NYPD to publish an impact and use policy, or IUP, at least 90 days before deploying new surveillance technologies or expanding existing ones. It also requires a public hearing before implementation so that the people most affected can weigh in. Big Apple Connect is being used to support the surveillance abilities of the NYPD. Therefore, it is a new surveillance technology under the law, and it should have had its own IUP. Similarly, adding thousands of cameras from Nycha buildings into the NYPD CCTV system is not business as usual. It is a major change in the use and scope of the NYPD's camera system, which itself also requires an addendum in their CCTV IUP per the Post Act. Yet none of this happened. There was no public notice, no pre-implementation hearing, and most importantly, no opportunity for the residents whose lives who will be impacted to ask questions or raise concerns. And beyond the Post Act, this program cuts at the very core of the Fourth Amendment. All New Yorkers are already subject to the NYPD's Eye in the Sky, its citywide CCTV network that tracks people on sidewalks, in parks, and at intersections. But traditionally, that surveillance ends when you get to your front door. Nycha residents will now lose even that respite. There is no longer any meaningful boundary between their private homes and the NYPD's gaze. The Constitution does not allow the government to place entire communities under round-the-clock suspicionless surveillance of their homes and daily movements. And it is fundamentally discriminatory to tell public housing residents that in order to access affordable housing and basic internet services, they must surrender their constitutional rights. Finally, this raises serious equal protection concerns. Over 500,000 New Yorkers live in Nycha housing, and the majority of whom are Black and Latino. Singling out Nycha residents for blanket surveillance means that people of color once again bear the heaviest burden of the NYPD's most invasive surveillance practices. The NYPD insists that surveillance placements are data-driven, but we know from Floyd versus City of New York that the department has a long and well-documented history of deliberately concentrating policing in Black and Latino neighborhoods. And when the NYPD now claims that cameras are being placed where data or crime occurs, we must ask what data and how is it produced? Decades of biased policing mean that the information the department collects overwhelmingly only reflects communities it has chosen to police most heavily, Black and brown communities. Data that is born of discrimination only reproduces discrimination. City Council must end the collaboration between NYPD and Big Apple Connect and provide Nycha residents basic internet access without round-the-clock surveillance. Nycha residents, like all New Yorkers, deserve the right of privacy within their own homes. Thank you.